My dad would talk all day long about football, racing, or golf. But when it came to other things, especially squishy things like feelings, Ed O'Connor was a man of very, very few words. He wasn't given to long speeches. He led and taught by example. Rather than ramble on, his thoughts were vocalized and expressed as staccato bursts. An interpretation of those pearls of wisdom was up to you and you alone. One of the few pieces of advice my dad gave me was incredibly simple, straightforward, and yet profound. It was just 5 words. Tell them who you are. All 3 of us kids learned it. It would be the last thing we'd hear as we'd step out the door. Yeah, tell them who you are. As a shy young kid, tell them who you are was the armor that gave me the courage to run errands for Dad uptown and talk to adults. When I'd walk into a store or the bank, I'd say, "Hi, I'm Jim O'Connor." The response was invariably the same, a blank stare. Until I followed with, "I'm Ed's son." Those 3 additional words always resulted in a smile and an open door. Everybody knew my dad. To know him was to love him. He always went 100 miles an hour. He always had a smile on his face, and he always had a kind word for whomever was standing before him. When I got to junior high, I began to learn that while I'd always be Ed's son, I needed to come out of Dad's shadow and begin making my own way. Tell him who you are then became shorthand for stand up straight, look him in the eye, give him a firm handshake, and speak up. Ed had no time for petulant teenagers, especially petulant teenage boys. When I joined the service and later entered my career, tell him who you are evolved into the realization that we alone are responsible for who we are and what we say and what we stand for. And it's up to us to tell our story. No one's going to do it for us. We need to be proud, stand up and speak up, yet remain humble and remember from where we came. Ed didn't hold with bragging. That point was driven home to me a few years ago when I was the executive director for university relations at the University of Northern Iowa. At that time, my dad was semi-retired and working as a part-time custodian at Lincoln Elementary here in Osage. He told me the 3rd graders were coming to UNI for a show at the Performing Arts Center. Ed loved kids, and kids loved Ed. Despite my busy schedule, I met the kids and their teachers as they came into the center that day. I had UNI pencils for all the kids. I introduced myself to the head teacher, explaining who I was at UNI, and that I was from Osage, and that I too had gone to Lincoln Elementary. She smiled politely and thanked me for the pencils, giving me that classic blank look of a very busy person who needed to move on. She wasn't nearly as impressed as I'd hoped. With newfound humility, I realized I needed to tell her who I really was. "I believe you know my dad," I said. "I'm Ed's son." "Oh," she exclaimed. "We love Ed. He's wonderful with the students." Then she turned and said in her teacher voice to her 50 young charges, "These pencils are for Mr. O'Connor. He's from Osage and he went to Lincoln just like you." Nothing. No reaction, just 50 blank stares. Then she said, "He's Ed's son." They went nuts. "Ed's son," they yelled. My dad was a rock star. No matter what I achieve in this world, I'll always be Ed's son. I'm good with that. More importantly, I'm very, very proud of it. Tell him who you are. Dad, if you haven't already, when you get to the check-in line at the pearly gates in heaven, don't forget to tell St. Peter who you are. You're Ed O'Connor, son, brother, husband, father, grandfather, boss, co-worker, and above all, friend. And please tell him, if you wouldn't mind, you're Jim's dad. Because I know someday when St. Peter gives me that same blank stare, I'll tell him, "I'm Ed's son." One note, it was my dad's tradition every year at St. Patrick's Day to give the ladies of town a green and white carnation as they came to the station. So you'll find at the entrance of the church as you leave carnations for all the ladies, and please, ladies, please take one. Dad would really appreciate it.